A 6-year-old girl crawls through a blizzard with a bullet wound in her head and a leather bag full of secrets that powerful men would kill to destroy. When she collapses in Wade Mercer's barn at midnight, whispering that her mama sent her to the man with the white barn, the former investigator realizes she's crossed 100 miles of frozen hell alone, hunted every step of the way. Inside that bag, evidence of murder, land theft, and corruption reaching into the highest offices of the Wyoming territory. Stay with me until the end of this story, hit that like button, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this tale travels. Now, let me take you back to that winter night when everything changed. The wind hit like frozen knives. Wade Mercer stood at his kitchen window, watching the snowstorm tear across the Wyoming flatlands with the kind of violence that made grown men pray. Not that Wade prayed anymore. He'd stopped talking to anyone, divine or otherwise, 3 years back when they'd buried his wife Sarah and their unborn daughter in ground so frozen they'd needed pickaxes to break the earth. Now he just drank coffee at midnight and waited for dawn like a man serving a sentence. The barn doors exploded open with a crash that made Wade's hand go straight to the revolver on his hip. His body moved before his mind caught up, muscle memory from years as a territorial investigator, back when he still gave a damn about other people's problems. He grabbed his rifle from above the door and stepped into the storm wearing nothing but wool pants and a thin shirt. The cold hit him like a physical blow. Snow swirled so thick he could barely see the barn 30 yards away, its white paint ghostly in the darkness. The doors hung open, banging against the frame in the wind. Wade's boots crunched through 8 inches of fresh powder. His breath came out in white clouds. Every instinct screamed ambush. This was exactly how they'd killed Tom Henderson last spring, lured him out of his house, and put 3 bullets in his back. He approached the barn from the side. Rifle up, finger on the trigger. Nothing moved inside except his 2 horses stamping nervously in their stalls. Then he heard it, a sound that didn't belong to the wind or the animals. Breathing, fast and shallow. A child's breathing. Wade swept the rifle across the barn's interior. Come out slow. Hands where I can see them. Silence. Then a whimper from the hayloft. He climbed the ladder one-handed, rifle pointed up. The hay smelled fresh, cut just last week. In the corner, barely visible in the lamplight from below, something small was buried in the straw. Wade pulled back the hay, and his stomach dropped. A little girl lay curled in a ball, her face pale as death. Blood matted her blonde hair on the left side and stained the hay beneath her head dark red. She wore a thin cotton dress completely wrong for winter, no coat, shoes barely holding together. Her arms were wrapped around a leather satchel, like it was the only thing keeping her alive. Her eyes opened, blue and terrified. "Don't," she whispered. "Please don't." Wade lowered the rifle immediately. "Jesus Christ, kid, what happened to you?" She tried to sit up and nearly passed out. Wade caught her before she fell, and that's when he felt how cold she was. This child was maybe 10 minutes from freezing to death. "I need to get you inside," he said. "Can you walk?" She shook her head, still clutching that satchel. Wade made a decision. He slung the rifle over his shoulder, scooped up the girl, satchel and all, and carried her through the storm to his house. She weighed almost nothing. Her skin felt like ice against his chest. Inside, he kicked the door shut and laid her on the couch near the fireplace. He threw 3 more logs on and grabbed every blanket in the house. The girl's lips were turning blue. "Talk to me," Wade said, wrapping her in wool. "What's your name?" "Lydia." Her voice was barely audible. "Lydia Vale." "Where'd you come from, Lydia?" "Mama?" She started shaking, and not from the cold. "Mama said find the man with the white barn. She said you'd protect me." Wade's hand stilled on the blankets. "Your mama knew me?" "She said your name. Wade Mercer. She made me remember it." Lydia's eyes filled with tears. They were coming. "She put me on a horse and told me to ride until I saw a white barn. She said don't stop for nothing. Don't trust nobody else." "Who was coming?" Before Lydia could answer, her eyes rolled back and she went limp. "No, no, no." Wade checked her pulse, weak but steady. The head wound wasn't bleeding anymore, but it looked bad. She needed a doctor, but the nearest one was in Coleridge, 15 miles away, and nobody was traveling in this storm. He cleaned the wound as best he could with whiskey and cloth, wrapped her head in clean bandages, and kept piling blankets on her. Then he sat back and looked at the leather satchel still clutched in her small hands. Wade tried to pull it away. Even unconscious, Lydia's grip tightened. "All right," he muttered. "Keep your secrets." He sat in the chair across from her, rifle across his knees, and watched the fire. Outside, the storm screamed. Inside, a little girl, with a bullet graze across her skull, slept the sleep of the nearly dead, holding onto a bag like it contained her entire world. Wade didn't sleep. He'd learned that trick years ago, how to stay awake for days if needed, how to listen to the silence between the wind, how to know when trouble was coming before it arrived. Trouble was definitely coming. No child crossed 100 miles of Wyoming winter alone unless something worse than death was chasing her. And she'd said they were coming, plural, armed and hunting. Around 3 in the morning, the bleeding started again. Wade changed the bandage and realized the wound wasn't from a fall. The angle was wrong. Someone had shot at this little girl's head, and by some miracle the bullet had only grazed her. He looked at her small face in the firelight. Maybe 6 years old, maybe 7. Hard to tell with kids. She had freckles across her nose and dirt under her fingernails, and the kind of exhaustion that came from running for your life. "What the hell did your mama get you into?" Wade whispered. The answer came at dawn when 3 riders appeared on the horizon. Wade saw them from the kitchen window, black shapes against white snow, moving slow and deliberate. Not the way honest men traveled. This was the pace of hunters who knew their prey was already trapped. He checked his weapons. 2 rifles, both loaded. 3 revolvers, 1 in his belt, 2 on the table. Extra ammunition scattered across the kitchen counter. If this went bad, he'd make them pay for every step. The riders stopped about 50 yards from the house, close enough to be threatening, far enough to avoid easy rifle range. Smart. One of them rode forward alone. He was a big man, heavy coat, face hidden by a scarf against the cold. When he got within shouting distance, he pulled the scarf down. The face was hard and scarred, the smile colder than the wind. "Morning," the man called out. His voice carried that particular tone Wade recognized instantly, the false friendliness of someone who enjoyed hurting people. "Name's Pritchard. We're looking for a lost child. Little girl, blonde hair, about 6 years old. Family's awful worried." Wade stepped onto the porch, rifle in hand but pointed down. Not aggressive yet. "That's so." "Yes, sir. Poor thing ran off during the storm last night. Probably confused, scared. We're searching every ranch in the territory." Pritchard's smile never reached his eyes. "You wouldn't have seen her, would you?" "Nope." "You mind if we take a look around, just to be thorough?" "I mind." The smile finally dropped. "Now, friend, we're just trying to help a lost child find her family." "I said no." Wade raised the rifle slightly, not pointing it yet, just making sure Pritchard could see it clearly. "This is private property. You got no warrant, no authority, and you're wearing guns like you expect trouble. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to turn around, ride back wherever you came from, and forget about my ranch." Pritchard studied him for a long moment. Then that cold smile returned. "You Wade Mercer, the investigator?" "Former investigator. Heard about you. Heard you used to be good at your job before." He let the sentence hang. "Before you lost everything. Must be hard living out here all alone with nothing but memories." Wade's finger moved closer to the trigger. "You need to leave. We will. But Mr. Mercer, if that little girl does show up, you should know she's carrying something that doesn't belong to her. Dangerous item. We're authorized to retrieve it by any means necessary." Pritchard leaned forward in his saddle. "Any means necessary." "Get off my land!" Pritchard tipped his hat mockingly. "We'll be back, with proper authority next time, and friends." He turned his horse and rode back to his companions. Wade watched them disappear into the white landscape. They weren't going for authority, they were going for reinforcements. He had maybe 6 hours before they returned. Inside, Lydia was awake, sitting up on the couch with the blankets wrapped around her. Her face was pale, but alert. Those blue eyes followed Wade as he came through the door. "They're looking for me," she said quietly. "Yeah." Wade set the rifle down and poured himself coffee. His hands were steady, but his mind was racing. "Want to tell me why?" Lydia looked down at the satchel in her lap. For a long moment, she just sat there, a tiny figure buried in blankets too big for her. Then she started unbuckling the bag. "Mama said only show this to Wade Mercer. She said only he would understand. Your mama and I know each other? I don't know. She just knew your name. She made me memorize it along with everything else. Everything else? Lydia pulled out a leather-bound ledger, worn at the edges and stained with what might have been blood. She handed it to Wade. He opened it, and his stomach turned to ice. Pages and pages of names, dates, amounts, land deeds marked transferred with notes about the original owners being deceased or relocated, payment records to sheriffs, judges, federal marshals, lists of murders disguised as accidents or blamed on Indians, a complete record of systematic theft, corruption, and killing stretching back 5 years. Wade recognized some of the names. Good people. Dead people. Jesus Christ, he breathed. Mama worked for them, Lydia said, her voice small. She kept the books. She wrote everything down exactly like they told her. They trusted her because she was quiet and did what she was told. The little girl's hands twisted in the blanket. But she was writing down everything in secret too. A second copy. This copy. Where's your mother now? Lydia's face crumpled. Dead. They found out what she was doing. 3 days ago they came to our house. Mama heard them coming, and she grabbed me in this bag and we ran to the barn. She put me on the fastest horse and told me to ride. Told me the directions. Made me repeat them until I had them perfect. And you rode? Alone? In the dark? I heard the guns. Tears ran down Lydia's cheeks. I heard Mama scream, but I kept riding like she told me. I rode for 3 days. They chased me. I heard them behind me sometimes. I hid in a burned house one night. I crossed a river and the horse fell and I had to walk. My feet got so cold I couldn't feel them. She looked up at Wade with eyes too old for her face. Mama said you'd help. She said you used to fight for people who couldn't fight for themselves. She said even if the whole world was bought and paid for, Wade Mercer couldn't be. Lydia's voice broke. Was she right? Wade stared at this child who'd crossed 100 miles of frozen hell alone, who'd been shot at, hunted, nearly frozen to death, who still had the strength to ask him if he was worth her mother's faith. 3 years ago, before Sarah died, he would have said yes without hesitation. Now? Kid, I'm not who your mama thought I was. Not anymore. But you didn't give me to them, Lydia pointed at the window. Those men were here and you sent them away. That was reflex. Habit. Mama said habits are who we really are when we stop thinking about it. She clutched the ledger. This is proof. Real proof. Names and numbers and everything. If someone brave showed it to the right people, all those bad men would go to jail. There's no such thing as the right people, Wade said bitterly. Half the names in that book are probably judges and lawmen. The system's rotten all the way through. Then what do I do? It was the way she said it. Not what do we do, but what do I do? Like she'd already accepted that she was alone again. Like she was used to adults failing her. Wade looked at the ledger, then at the little girl, then out at the empty white landscape where armed men were gathering to kill a child. Something Sarah used to say came back to him. She'd said it the night before she died, when they'd been arguing about him taking on one more dangerous case. Wade, you don't get to choose whether evil exists. You only get to choose whether you stand against it. He told her he was tired of standing, that he wanted a normal life with her and the baby. She just smiled and said, "But you're not built that way, and that's why I love you." 24 hours later, she was dead, caught in crossfire from a case that wasn't even his. Wade set his coffee down and made a decision he knew he'd probably regret. All right. Lydia's head snapped up. All right, what? All right, I'll help. But we're doing this smart, not brave. Brave gets you killed. He pointed at the ledger. That's leverage. Dangerous leverage. We can't just walk into town and hand it to the first lawman we see. We need to know who's clean and who's dirty. We need allies. And we need time to plan. Do we have time? No. Which is why we're leaving now. Wade moved fast. He packed supplies. Food, ammunition, medical supplies, warm clothes that would be too big for Lydia, but better than nothing. He saddled both horses and loaded them with everything they could carry. Lydia watched from the couch, still wrapped in blankets. Where are we going? Old mining camp about 20 miles north. Abandoned since the silver ran out, but there's a cabin there that's still standing. I used it as a hideout a few times when I was working territorial cases. Wade strapped a rifle to his saddle. We hole up there while I figure out who we can trust. What about your house? Just a house. But it wasn't, and they both knew it. This was the house he'd built with Sarah, the place where they'd planned their future, the last place he'd been happy. Wade looked around one more time, at the chair where Sarah used to read, at the table where they'd eaten dinner, at the bedroom where he could still smell her perfume, sometimes if he let himself remember. Then he walked out and didn't look back. They rode north through snow that was finally starting to ease. Wade put Lydia on the gentler horse and tied her saddle to his with a lead rope so she wouldn't get separated. She still had that satchel strapped across her chest. You should probably put that in my saddlebag, Wade said. Be easier to ride. No. Lydia's grip tightened. Mama died for this. I'm not letting go. Wade nodded. He understood obsession. Fair enough. They rode in silence for the first hour. The landscape was brutal, endless white broken only by occasional stands of trees. The temperature had to be below 0. Wade kept checking Lydia to make sure she wasn't freezing again. Around noon, she spoke up. Can I ask you something? Go ahead. Why'd you stop being an investigator? Wade was quiet for a long time. Then, my wife was killed. After that, nothing seemed to matter much. How'd it happen? Wrong place, wrong time. I was working a case following some cattle rustlers. They spotted me, started shooting. Sarah was in town buying supplies. Stray bullet found her instead of me. He stared straight ahead. She was pregnant, 6 months. I'm sorry. Yeah, me too. They rode on. The wind picked up again, but the snow had stopped. That was good. It meant their tracks wouldn't be covered, but it also meant anyone following could see where they'd gone. Around mid-afternoon, Wade heard something that made his blood run cold. Horses, multiple horses, coming fast from the south. He reined in and listened. At least 6 riders, maybe more, moving at a gallop. They were following the trail. We need to move, Wade said. Now. He kicked his horse into a run, and Lydia's mount followed on the lead rope. The cabin was still 8 miles away, and there was no cover out here, nothing but open ground and snow. The riders behind them were closing fast. Wade made calculations in his head. They were on slower horses carrying more weight. The men chasing them were riding light and angry. They'd be overtaken in less than 20 minutes. He scanned the landscape desperately. There, about a quarter-mile east, a rocky outcropping that would provide some cover. This way! He turned the horses and headed for the rocks. They reached the outcropping just as the riders came into view behind them. Wade jumped down, grabbed Lydia, and pulled both horses behind the largest boulder. Stay down, he ordered. Don't make a sound. He positioned himself where he could see the approaching riders. 7 men, all armed with rifles. They were following the tracks in the snow, but the ground here was rocky enough that the trail became confused. The riders slowed, spreading out to search. Wade recognized Pritchard in the lead. The big man was pointing and giving orders. 3 riders split off to search the perimeter. 4 stayed with Pritchard. They were 100 yards away, good rifle range. Wade could probably drop 3 of them before they even knew where the shots were coming from. But that would start a gunfight with a 6-year-old girl in the crossfire. And those were odds he'd already played once with Sarah. He wouldn't make that mistake again. Instead, he waited, watched, hoped they'd miss the trail and ride past. One of the searching riders was coming closer, 50 yards, 40. Lydia made a small sound of fear. Wade put a hand on her shoulder. Stay quiet, 30 yards. The rider stopped. He was staring at something in the snow. Wade's jaw tightened. The man had spotted where their horses had turned off the main trail. The rider opened his mouth to shout, and Wade shot him. The crack of the rifle echoed across the frozen landscape. The rider pitched backward off his horse with a hole in his chest. For one frozen second, nobody moved. Then all hell broke loose. The riders scattered, diving off horses and scrambling for cover. Bullets whined off the rocks around Wade. He pulled Lydia deeper into the outcropping and returned fire. A second rider went down, then a third, but they'd pinpointed his position now. Bullets hammered the rocks, sending up sprays of stone chips. One round passed so close to Wade's head he felt the wind of it. Cover your ears, he shouted to Lydia. She pressed her hands to her head, eyes squeezed shut. Wade fired methodically. 4th man down. But there were still 3 left, including Pritchard, and they were flanking him now, moving to positions where they'd have clear shots. He was pinned down with limited ammunition and a child to protect. This was going bad fast. Then he heard something that changed everything. More horses. Coming from the north this time. Multiple riders. Pritchard heard it too. He whistled to his remaining men and they pulled back, mounting their horses and retreating south at a full gallop. Wade stayed in position, rifle ready. The new riders approached slowly, hands visible. There were 3 of them. Leading was a woman in her 30s, dressed like a rancher, rifle across her saddle but pointed down. Next to her was an old man with a white beard and sharp eyes. The third was younger, wearing a federal marshal's badge. The woman called out, "Wade Mercer, that you?" Wade stayed behind cover. "Depends who's asking." "Mara Quinn. We met 4 years back when you investigated those rustlers near Broken Creek." Wade remembered. She'd been married then. Good woman, tough as nails. "Your husband with you?" "Dead. Cholera took him last winter." "Sorry to hear that." Mara dismounted slowly, hands still visible. "Heard some talk in Coleridge about riders hunting a little girl. Heard they were headed this direction. Figured maybe you were involved. This used to be your territory." She paused. "That child with you?" Wade made a decision. He stood up, rifle lowered but ready. "She is." "She hurt?" "Recovering. Men who were chasing her, they work for Jonah Creed." Wade's blood turned to ice at that name. "What?" "Jonah Creed," Mara repeated. "Runs the biggest land operation in Wyoming. Been buying up property for years, except nobody seems to know where he gets his money. Those riders were his men, which means whatever that little girl's carrying, Creed wants it bad enough to kill for it." The old man spoke up, his voice gravelly. "Name's Elias Boone. I knew your father. Good man." He nodded at the bodies in the snow. "You always did shoot straight." The third rider, the marshal, finally spoke. "Silas Reed, I'm out of the Denver office. Been tracking Creed's operation for 8 months. He looked at Wade carefully. "If that child has evidence against Creed, she's in danger from more than just hired guns. Creed's got judges, sheriffs, even federal officers in his pocket." "How do I know you're not one of them?" Wade asked. "You don't. But I'm betting that little girl is carrying something important enough that Creed sent 7 men after her in the middle of winter. And I'm betting you're smart enough to know you can't fight his whole organization alone." Wade looked at these 3 strangers. At Mara, who he'd worked with once and respected. At Elias, who knew his family. At Reed, who might be honest or might be another bought lawman. Then he looked down at Lydia, still pressed against the rock with her hands over her ears and that satchel across her chest. "All right," he said finally. "But we talk somewhere safe, and if any of you make a move I don't like, I'll kill you where you stand." Reed smiled slightly. "Fair enough." They rode together toward the mining camp, 7 horses moving through the snow. Wade kept Lydia close and his rifle closer. Behind them, 4 bodies cooled in the snow. The war had started, and Wade Mercer, who'd spent 3 years trying to die quietly, found himself alive and fighting again. Whether he wanted to be or not. The mining camp looked like a graveyard for broken dreams. Wade led the group through what had once been a bustling silver operation, now just collapsed shacks, rusted equipment, and skeletal mine shafts that yawned open like mouths missing teeth. The wind howled through empty windows. Snow had drifted against buildings that would probably fall over completely by next winter. "Cheerful place," Mara muttered. "It's hidden," Wade replied. "That's what matters." The only structure still worth a damn was a stone cabin at the far end of the camp. Wade had used it 5 years back when tracking a counterfeiting ring. The roof was intact, the door still hung straight, and there was a fireplace that actually drew air instead of filling the room with smoke. Inside smelled like dust and mice, but it was shelter. Wade got Lydia settled on the one piece of furniture that hadn't rotted, a wooden bench against the far wall. She hadn't spoken since the shooting started, just sat there clutching that satchel, eyes too wide, breathing too fast. "You hurt?" Wade asked quietly. She shook her head, but her hands were trembling. "That was your first gunfight." A nod this time. "It gets easier," Wade lied. Then he caught himself. "No, that's not true. It doesn't get easier. You just get more used to being scared." Lydia looked up at him. "Were you scared?" "Terrified." "You didn't look it. That's the trick. Looking calm when you're not." He squeezed her shoulder. "You did good, kid. Stayed quiet. Stayed down. That's all you needed to do." While Elias got a fire going and Mara checked the perimeter, Marshal Reed pulled Wade aside. We need to talk about what's in that bag. I know what's in it. Do you? Because from where I'm standing, that little girl is carrying enough evidence to bring down the largest criminal enterprise in Wyoming. Maybe further. Creed's operation stretches into Colorado, Montana, probably the Dakotas, too. Reed kept his voice low. If even half of what I suspect is documented in that ledger, we're talking about systematic theft of federal land, bribery of government officials, and dozens of murders. Wade studied the marshal's face. Reed was maybe 35, lean and hard-eyed, with the look of someone who'd seen enough corruption to stop being surprised by it. His badge was real federal issue, not the fake tin stars some towns handed out. Why should I trust you? Wade asked. You shouldn't. For all you know, I'm on Creed's payroll too. Reed pulled off his gloves. But here's the thing. I've spent 8 months building a case against him. 8 months of digging through land records, interviewing families who lost their ranches, tracking money that disappears into shell companies. I've got pieces of the puzzle, but nothing solid enough to bring charges. If that ledger has what I think it has, it's the last piece I need. Or it's bait to find out what evidence exists so you can destroy it. Reed smiled without humor. Yeah, or that. He looked over at Lydia. But I'm betting you're not stupid enough to hand it over without insurance. And I'm betting that little girl's mother wasn't stupid either. So here's what I'm proposing. Let me see the ledger. If I'm dirty, you shoot me and dump my body in one of those mine shafts. If I'm clean, we work together to make sure that evidence reaches people who can actually use it. And who would those people be? That's the problem, isn't it? Reed rubbed his face. Half the territorial judges are compromised. The governor's office is a joke. Local law enforcement is either bought or scared. We need to go higher, federal circuit court in Denver maybe, or directly to the Territorial Oversight Committee in Washington. Mara returned from checking the perimeter. We've got maybe 4 hours of daylight left. Those riders who ran off will be reporting back to Creed. By tomorrow morning, this whole area will be crawling with his men. Then we move tonight, Elias said. He was feeding wood into the fireplace, his movements slow but steady. There's an old trail through the hills that leads to Pinewood Station. Stage stop on the main route to Denver. We can get the child on a coach, send her east with someone Creed can't touch. No. Everyone turned to look at Lydia. She was standing now, still holding the satchel. I'm not leaving. Kid, you need to get somewhere safe, Wade said. I'm not safe anywhere, don't you understand? Mama said Creed has people everywhere. If I run, they'll just keep chasing me. The only way I'm safe is if he can't chase me anymore. Her voice was steady, despite the fear in her eyes. The only way that happens is if everyone knows what he did. If it's public. If he can't hide it. Wade exchanged glances with Reed. The kid had a point. She's right, Mara said. You put her on a stage, Creed will have men waiting at every stop between here and Denver. But if we expose him publicly, with witnesses, with the evidence out in the open where it can't be buried, she let the sentence hang. Reed paced the small cabin. There's a territorial assembly meeting in Coleridge in 3 days. Every judge, every federal appointee, every land office administrator will be there. If we could present the evidence then, in front of everyone, Creed couldn't suppress it without exposing himself. Coleridge is 15 miles from Creed's main ranch, Wade said. We'd be walking into his territory, which is exactly why he won't expect it. Elias laughed, a dry sound like wind through dead leaves. You people are talking about starting a war with the most powerful man in Wyoming while protecting a 6-year-old girl. You understand how insane that sounds? You got a better idea? Mara asked. Several. None of them involve getting killed in the next 72 hours. But despite his words, Elias was checking his rifle. Of course, I'm too old to be smart anymore. When do we leave? Wade looked at these people who'd somehow become his allies in the space of an hour. A widow with a sharp tongue and sharper aim. An old man who'd probably seen more fights than all of them combined. A federal marshal who might be honest or might be leading them into a trap. And a little girl with a leather bag and more courage than sense. 3 years ago, he would have called this suicide. Maybe it still was. We rest until dark, Wade decided. Then we move. But first we need to know exactly what we're working with. He turned to Lydia. Can I see the ledger now? She hesitated, then slowly unbuckled the satchel and pulled out the worn leather book. Wade took it carefully, like it might explode. The others gathered around as he opened it to the first page. What they found was worse than any of them had imagined. The ledger wasn't just evidence of crimes, it was a complete operational manual for Creed's empire. Page after page of land seizures, each one documented with the method used. Families run off by hired guns. Property burned while owners were away. Fraudulent debt claims filed through corrupted courts. Straight-up murder when other methods failed. Names jumped out at Wade. People he'd known. Cases he'd investigated but never solved because the trail always went cold. Now he knew why.
Sweet mother of... Mara breathed, reading over his shoulder. This goes back 7 years. He's stolen over 200,000 acres. Reed was writing names in a small notebook. These judges, I recognize some of them, sitting judges, still on the bench. His face had gone pale. And look here, payment records to federal marshals. My God, there's 3 names from my own office.
Elias pointed to an entry dated 2 years back. The Henderson family, I knew them, good people. The official report said they died in a house fire, accident with a lamp. He read the ledger entry. Locked inside, structure burned, property claimed for unpaid debts of $47. Wade felt sick. This wasn't just corruption. This was wholesale slaughter disguised as legal proceedings. Then he turned a page and froze. There, in careful handwriting, dated 3 years and 2 months ago. Sarah Mercer, eliminated during Dusty Creek operation. Collateral necessity. Payment, $200 to JC for cleanup. The cabin went silent. Wade stared at those words, read them again and again. JC Jonah Creed. Creed had ordered the shooting in Dusty Creek. The stray bullet that killed Sarah wasn't random. It was deliberate. She'd been eliminated because... why? Wade scanned the surrounding entries. There, a land seizure near Dusty Creek. The owner was Wade's neighbor, Tom Garrett. Sarah had been helping Tom's wife that day, taking her supplies. The ledger listed Tom as resistant to relocation. They'd killed Sarah to send Tom a message. Wade's hand started to shake. The ledger blurred in front of him. Wade, Mara's voice came from far away. Wade, breathe. He couldn't breathe. 3 years. 3 years he'd thought it was random bad luck. 3 years of guilt, of wondering what he could have done differently. 3 years of slowly dying inside. And it was murder, planned, paid for, $200. Who's JC? Reed asked, still not understanding. Jonah Creed, Mara said quietly. He didn't just order it, he did it himself. The marshal's face went white. Creed was in Dusty Creek that day? Wade stood up so fast the bench fell over. He walked to the far side of the cabin and punched the stone wall hard enough to split his knuckles open. Pain shot up his arm. He hit it again and again. Strong hands grabbed him from behind. Elias, surprisingly strong for an old man. Easy, son. Easy. He killed her. Wade's voice didn't sound like his own. He killed Sarah, and I didn't even know who to blame. I quit. I gave up. I spent 3 years in that house waiting to die, and he's been out there the whole time, stealing and killing, and now you know, Elias said firmly. Now you know, and you can do something about it. Wade pulled away, breathing hard. His hand was bleeding. He didn't care. Lydia was watching him with those 2 old eyes. Your wife is in the book? He nodded, not trusting his voice. My mama too. Page 73. Wade turned to that page. There it was, written in the same careful hand. Margaret Vale. Security risk. Kept duplicate records. Terminated at residence. Child escaped, carrying evidence. Recovery priority, critical. So that was Lydia's mother, Margaret Vale. A woman who'd worked for monsters and tried to atone by documenting their crimes. A woman who'd sacrificed herself to give her daughter a chance. We're the same, Lydia said softly. We both lost someone to him. Wade looked at this little girl who'd crossed 100 miles of hell. This child who should have been playing with dolls but instead carried evidence of mass murder. Yeah, they were the same. And Creed was going to pay for all of it. The Territorial Assembly, Wade said, turning back to Reed. You said 3 days? Yes. We need more than the ledger. We need witnesses, living people who can testify to what Creed did. Wade's mind was racing now, the grief transforming into something sharper, more focused. People he couldn't buy or scare. People who lost everything but survived. Mara caught on. Tom Garrett. He's still alive, living in a shanty town near Broken Creek. If Sarah was killed because of him, he'll remember. The Patterson family, Elias added, lost their ranch 2 years back. They're working at a lumber camp north of here. I could ride there in a day. Reed was nodding. And I can access federal records that corroborate the ledger. Land transfers, death certificates that don't match the official causes. We build a case so airtight Creed can't wriggle out of it.
3 days, Wade said.
We have 3 days to gather witnesses, get them to Coleridge, and present this evidence before Creed realizes what we're doing and shuts us down. He already knows we're doing something, Mara pointed out. He sent 7 men after that little girl. He knows we have the ledger. He doesn't know we're going public with it. As far as Creed knows, we're running scared, trying to hide. That gives us an advantage. Not much of one. It's what we've got. They spent the next hour planning. Reed would ride to the federal land office in Sterling, grab whatever documents he could access without raising suspicion. Elias would head to the lumber camp to find the Pattersons. Mara would track down Tom Garrett. That left Wade to protect Lydia and keep the ledger safe. I don't like splitting up, Mara said. Creed's men could be anywhere. We don't have a choice. We need those witnesses. Wade checked his revolver, reloaded it. We meet in Coleridge in 2 days, evening of the assembly. If anyone doesn't show, the rest go forward anyway. And if we're walking into a trap, Elias asked, then we die trying. Wade looked at each of them. Nobody has to do this. You can walk away right now, and I won't think less of you. Reed stood up. I've spent 8 months watching Creed operate with impunity, watching him buy judges and kill families. If there's even a chance to stop him, I'm taking it. I'm in, Mara said. Creed's land grabs killed my husband. Maybe not directly, but he took over the water rights to our ranch, and we couldn't afford to drill new wells. Cholera came because we were using contaminated water. I've got scores to settle. Elias just checked his rifle and said nothing, which was answer enough. Wade felt something he hadn't felt in 3 years. Purpose. Direction. A reason to keep breathing beyond simple spite. All right then, he said. Let's burn this bastard's empire down. They left at dusk, each riding in a different direction. Wade watched them disappear into the gathering darkness, then turned to Lydia. Just you and me now, kid. Where are we going? Somewhere even I barely know about. A place so remote, Creed's men would never think to look. Wade mounted his horse and pulled Lydia up behind him. You ever hear of Devil's Canyon? No. Good. That means nobody else has either. They rode through the night, heading deeper into the mountains. The temperature dropped below 0. Stars came out like ice chips scattered across black velvet. Wade kept his rifle ready and his eyes moving, watching for any sign of pursuit. Around midnight, Lydia spoke up from behind him. Can I ask you something? Sure. When you read about your wife in the book, what did that feel like? Wade was quiet for a long time. Then, like someone had been lying to me for 3 years and I just found out. Like I'd been blaming myself for something that wasn't my fault. He paused. And like I finally knew who to be angry at. Is that good? Knowing. I don't know yet. Ask me when this is over. They rode on. The landscape got rougher, all broken rock and steep ravines. This was territory even most prospectors avoided. Too dangerous, too remote, too likely to kill you if you made one wrong step. Around 2 a.m, they reached Devil's Canyon. It wasn't really a canyon, more like a crack in the earth about 20 feet wide and 100 feet deep. At the bottom ran a stream that hadn't frozen yet because the canyon walls blocked most of the wind, and tucked into a cave halfway down the south wall was a shelter Wade had discovered years ago while tracking outlaws. We're going down there? Lydia asked nervously. Trust me, getting down was the hard part. Wade had to dismount, lead the horses along a narrow trail that switchbacked down the canyon wall, with Lydia clinging to his back. One wrong step, and they'd both plummet into the rocks below. But they made it. The cave was exactly as Wade remembered, dry, hidden from above, big enough for the horses and both of them. There was even old firewood someone had left behind, probably prospectors. Wade got a small fire going, just enough for warmth without creating smoke that might be visible from above. Lydia collapsed next to it, exhausted. We're safe here, Wade said. At least for tonight. How long do we stay? 2 days. Then we ride to Coleridge for the assembly. He handed her some dried meat and hardtack. You should eat something. She picked at the food without much enthusiasm. Wade? Yeah? When we show everyone the book, what happens to me after? It was the question Wade had been avoiding thinking about. If they succeeded, if Creed went down, if the corruption was exposed, what happened to a 6-year-old orphan with no family left? I don't know, he admitted, but I promise you won't end up in some workhouse or orphanage. I'll make sure of that. How? Wade met her eyes. Because you're not alone anymore. You've got me. Lydia studied his face for a long moment, like she was trying to decide if he meant it. Then, slowly, she nodded. They settled in for the night. Wade took first watch, sitting at the cave entrance with his rifle across his knees. The stars were incredible out here, away from any town lights, the kind of stars Sarah used to love. He thought about her now, without the crushing guilt, for the first time in 3 years. Thought about how she'd fought for people who couldn't fight for themselves. How she'd never turned away from someone who needed help, even when it was dangerous. She would have liked Lydia, he realized, would have taken her in without hesitation. I'm doing this for both of us, Wade whispered to the stars. For you and for that little girl's mother. For everyone Creed destroyed. The stars didn't answer, but somehow Wade felt better anyway. The next day passed slowly. Wade spent it checking their supplies, cleaning weapons, and trying to keep Lydia's spirits up by teaching her how to skip stones across the stream at the bottom of the canyon. She was terrible at it, which made them both laugh. That night, Lydia had a nightmare. Wade woke to her screaming, thrashing in her bedroll. He moved quickly, pulling her close. Hey, you're safe. I'm here. She clung to him, sobbing. The men with masks. They were in our house. Mama was screaming and I couldn't help her. I just ran like she told me, but I should have helped her. Stop. Listen to me. Wade held her shoulders firmly. Your mama told you to run because that was how you could help her. By surviving, by getting that ledger to safety. You did exactly what she needed you to do. But she died. I know, and that's not fair and it's not right, and nothing I say will make it hurt less. Wade wiped tears from her face. But she died protecting you. And the best way to honor that is to finish what she started, to make sure those men pay for what they did. Lydia nodded against his chest, still crying but quieter now. Wade held her until she fell back asleep, then sat there in the darkness, thinking about how this little girl had somehow become his responsibility, how he'd gone from wanting to die alone to having someone depend on him again. It was terrifying. It was also the first thing that had felt right since Sarah died. The second day, Wade taught Lydia how to load a revolver. She watched carefully as he showed her how to check if it was loaded, how to hold it properly, where to aim. I don't like guns, she said. Neither do I, but you need to know this, just in case. In case what? In case something happens to me and you need to protect yourself. Lydia's face went pale. You're not going to die. Probably not. But I'm teaching you anyway. She learned fast, he'd give her that. By the end of the day, she could load, aim, and fire with decent accuracy. Not great, but good enough to maybe save her life if it came to that. That evening, they sat by the fire and Lydia told him about her mother. How Margaret Vale had been a school teacher before Creed hired her as a bookkeeper. How she'd taught Lydia to read using Shakespeare and Dickens. How she'd sung old folk songs while braiding Lydia's hair. She sounds like a good person, Wade said. She was, but she made mistakes too. She knew what Creed was doing and she kept working for him anyway. She said she was scared, said she had a daughter to feed and nowhere else to go. Lydia stared into the fire. But at the end, she tried to make it right. That counts for something, doesn't it? It counts for everything. The third day they prepared to leave. Wade packed their supplies carefully, checked every weapon twice, and gave Lydia final instructions. When we get to Coleridge, you stay close to me. Don't talk to anyone I don't approve first. If shooting starts, you hit the ground and stay down. Understand? Yes. And Lydia, no matter what happens, you make sure that ledger gets to the territorial assembly. Even if I'm not there to... Don't. She grabbed his arm. Don't talk like that. Wade softened. All right, but promise me anyway. I promise. They climbed out of Devil's Canyon as the sun was setting. The horses were well rested and fresh. The ride to Coleridge would take most of the night, but they'd arrive in time for the morning assembly. Halfway there, they spotted riders in the distance. Wade's hand went to his rifle immediately. But as the riders got closer, he recognized them. Mara, Elias, and Reed, all returning as planned. They met on a wind-swept ridge overlooking the valley. "You get them?" Wade asked. Mara nodded. "Tom Garrett's coming. He's bringing his whole family to testify. Says he's been waiting 3 years for a chance at justice." "Patterson family, too," Elias reported. "Father, mother, and 2 sons. All willing to speak." Reed looked exhausted, but triumphant. "I've got copies of every fraudulent land transfer in the last 5 years. And I found something else. Bank records showing payments from a shell company directly to judges and federal officers. It corroborates everything in the ledger." "Any trouble getting it?" "Some. I had to break into the land office at midnight. If anyone checks, they'll know the files are missing." Reed smiled grimly. "But by then it won't matter. We'll have already gone public." They rode the last miles together, reaching the outskirts of Coleridge just before dawn. The town was bigger than Wade remembered, must have grown in the 3 years he'd been hiding from the world. There were new buildings, new businesses, and a massive banner across Main Street announcing the Territorial Assembly. "Where's the assembly being held?" Wade asked. "Town Hall starts at 10 o'clock. Reed checked his pocket watch. "We've got 4 hours. Then let's find our witnesses and get ready to burn this whole thing down." But as they rode into town, Wade noticed something that made his blood run cold. There were too many men with guns, standing on street corners, watching the roads, positioned outside the town hall. Some wore deputy badges, but most were just hired muscle pretending to be legitimate. "Creed knows," Mara said quietly. "Maybe. Or maybe he's just being cautious." Wade scanned the street. "Either way, we're committed now." They found Tom Garrett and the Pattersons at a boarding house on the edge of town. Both families looked scared but determined. Tom was a wiry man in his 50s, face lined with hard living. When he saw Wade, his eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry about Sarah," he said. "I'm so sorry. If she hadn't been helping my wife that day..." "It wasn't your fault," Wade said firmly. "And today we make sure everyone knows whose fault it was." The families gathered in a back room to review their testimony. Wade went over the plan one more time. Reed would present the evidence to the assembly, the families would testify, and the ledger would be entered as official evidence. Everything documented, everything public, everything witnessed by every important official in the territory. Creed couldn't suppress it without exposing himself. At least that was the theory. At 9:30, they started walking toward the town hall. Wade kept Lydia between him and Mara, the most protected position. The families walked behind them, nervous but resolute. Reed led the way, his federal badge displayed prominently. The armed men on the street watched them pass. None made a move, but the threat hung in the air like smoke. They reached the town hall steps. The building was already packed with territorial officials, land office administrators, judges, and businessmen. Wade recognized some faces from the ledger. And standing at the top of the steps, smiling down at them like a wolf welcoming sheep, was a man Wade had never seen before but instantly knew. Jonah Creed. He was tall, well-dressed, with a scar running from his left eye to his jaw. His smile never reached his cold eyes. Behind him stood at least a dozen armed men, including Pritchard. "Marshal Reed," Creed said pleasantly. "What a surprise. I heard you were investigating some land disputes. Making any progress?" Reed's hand moved toward his gun, but Wade grabbed his arm. "Not yet." "We're here to present evidence to the assembly," Reed said carefully. "Evidence? How fascinating." Creed's eyes moved to Lydia. "And who's this charming little girl?" "A witness," Wade said, stepping forward, "along with these families here. We have testimony about illegal land seizures, bribery, and murder." Creed's smile widened. "That's quite an accusation. I hope you have something to back it up beyond the word of some disgruntled ranchers." Wade pulled the ledger from Lydia's satchel and held it up. "We've got everything. Names, dates, payments, all in your handwriting. Or should I say, in the handwriting of Margaret Vale, your bookkeeper, who you murdered 3 days ago." For just a second, Creed's smile faltered. Then he started laughing. "You people," he said, shaking his head. "You rode all this way, risked your lives, gathered witnesses, and you actually think anyone in that room is going to listen to you?" He gestured at the town hall. "Half the men in there are on my payroll. The other half no better than to cross me. Then we'll take it to Denver. To Washington if we have to.
You'll be dead before you reach Denver. Creed stopped smiling. I'm giving you one chance. Hand over that ledger, take the girl, and ride away. You can live quietly wherever you want. I'll even pay you for your trouble.
No deal. Then you're fools. All of you. Creed signaled to his men. Take them. And that's when all hell broke loose. Reed drew first, his revolver clearing leather in a blur that surprised even Wade. He put a bullet through Pritchard's shoulder before the big man could even reach for his gun. The crack of the shot echoed off the town hall steps like a starting pistol. Then everything happened at once. Creed's men rushed forward and Wade shoved Lydia behind him, bringing his rifle up. He fired twice, dropping the two closest gunmen. Mara's rifle barked from his left, and another man went down clutching his leg. Elias had somehow produced a shotgun from under his coat, and the boom of it sent three men diving for cover. "Get inside!" Wade shouted, pushing Lydia toward the town hall doors. But the doors slammed shut. Through the windows, Wade could see the territorial officials backing away from the violence, faces pale. Nobody was coming to help. Creed had been right about that much. A bullet whined past Wade's ear and he returned fire, his shots forcing Creed's men back down the steps. The street erupted into chaos. Townspeople scattered, screaming. Horses bolted. Windows shattered. Tom Garrett grabbed his wife and sons, pulling them toward the alley between buildings. The Patterson family followed, the father firing a pistol to cover their retreat. These weren't gunfighters, just desperate people caught in a war they'd been dragged into. "We can't hold this position," Mara yelled over the gunfire. She'd taken cover behind a water trough, firing methodically. "There's too many of them." She was right. Wade counted at least 15 of Creed's men, and more were running toward the sound of shots. They'd be surrounded in minutes. "The hotel!" Reed pointed across the street at a 2-story building with a balcony. "Higher ground." They ran. Wade scooped Lydia into his arms and sprinted across Main Street while bullets kicked up dirt at his feet. Elias was right behind him, moving surprisingly fast for an old man. Mara provided covering fire, then followed. Reed hit the hotel doors first, shouldering them open. The lobby was empty. The clerk already fled. They thundered up the stairs to the second floor. "Barricade the stairway," Wade ordered. Elias and Reed started dragging furniture while Wade carried Lydia to the far end of the hallway. There was a room with windows overlooking the street. He kicked the door open and set her down. "Stay away from the windows. Get in that corner." He pointed to the spot farthest from any exterior wall. Lydia's face was white, but she wasn't crying. She clutched the satchel to her chest and did exactly as he said. Mara appeared in the doorway. "They're regrouping. Creed's pulling them back." Wade looked out the window carefully. She was right. The gunmen had retreated to positions across the street, taking cover behind buildings and wagons. Smart. They'd realized a frontal assault would cost too many lives. Now they'd just wait and starve Wade's group out. "How much ammunition do we have?" Wade asked. They did a quick inventory. Between all of them, maybe 60 rounds. Enough for a fight, not enough for a siege. Reed was watching the street too. "They're not attacking. Why?" "Because Creed's not stupid." Wade reloaded his rifle. "He knows we're trapped. He can just wait until we run out of bullets or try to make a break for it. Either way, he wins." "So what do we do?" Wade looked at the faces around him. Mara, jaw set with determination despite the fear in her eyes. Elias breathing hard but still gripping his shotgun. Reed, federal badge on his chest covered in dust and gunpowder. And Lydia, in the corner, a 6-year-old child who shouldn't be anywhere near this violence. 3 years ago, Wade would have had a plan. Would have seen some angle, some way to turn the situation around. Now his mind felt sluggish, rusty from disuse. Then Lydia spoke up. "The assembly, they're all still in there, right? In the town hall?" "So?" Mara asked. "So they heard the shooting. They know something's happening." Lydia stood up, still holding the satchel. "What if we made them listen? What if we forced them to hear the truth?" Reed shook his head. "We can't get to the town hall. Creed has it surrounded." "But we have this." Lydia held up the ledger. "And we have people who were there, who saw what happened." She looked at Wade. "Where are the families, Mr. Garrett and the Pattersons?" Wade felt something click in his brain. "They made it to the alley. Probably in one of the back buildings by now." "Can we get to them?" "Maybe. If we go through the buildings, stay off the street."
Wade was starting to see it now. But what's your point? My mama used to say the truth is like water. You can try to hold it back, but it always finds a way through. Lydia's voice was steady. Those people in the town hall, they're scared. They saw Mr. Creed's men shooting at a federal marshal. They heard the gunfire. Some of them have to be wondering what he's so desperate to hide. Mara caught on. We can't present the evidence officially, but we could present it unofficially. Get it to someone in that assembly who isn't bought. Let them see it. Who? Reed asked. Creed said half of them are on his payroll. Then we find the other half. Wade started moving, his mind working faster now. Reed, you've been investigating this for months. You must know someone in that room who's clean. The marshal thought hard. Judge Edwin Blackwell, circuit judge from Denver. He's only here because the territorial governor is sick and couldn't attend. Blackwell wasn't supposed to be at this assembly, which means Creed wouldn't have had time to buy him. You sure? Sure enough to bet my life on it, which, given our current situation, I'm already doing anyway. Wade looked out this window again. The town hall was directly across the street, maybe 60 yards away. Between here and there were at least a dozen armed men and Jonah Creed himself, now standing in the middle of the street like he owned it, which, in this town, he probably did. We need a distraction, Wade said. Something big enough to pull those gunmen away from the town hall. Elias was checking his shotgun. I might have an idea about that. How do you folks feel about fire? They all turned to look at him. The old man smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. There's a lumber yard 2 blocks east, saw it on the ride in, full of dry wood, probably some barrels of pitch for waterproofing. If someone were to, say, accidentally knock over a lantern near all that. You'd burn down half the town, Mara finished. Well, yes, but it would definitely get people's attention. Wade considered it. Arson wasn't exactly how he'd planned to expose corruption. Then again, nothing about this day had gone according to plan. Do it, he decided. Elias, you and Mara create the distraction. Reed and I will get to the families, get them to the town hall, and force Blackwell to listen. Lydia stays here. No, Lydia stepped forward. I'm the one with the ledger. Judge Blackwell needs to hear from me. I'm the witness. You're 6 years old. I'm the one my mama trusted with this. Her voice didn't waver. And I'm the one who carried it this far. I'm not hiding now. Wade wanted to argue, wanted to lock her in this room where she'd be safe. But the look in her eyes stopped him. This wasn't a scared child anymore. This was someone who'd made a decision and wouldn't be moved. He'd seen that look before, in Sarah's eyes, the day she'd insisted on helping Tom Garrett's wife despite the danger. Some people couldn't be talked out of doing the right thing, even when it might kill them. Fine, Wade said. But you stay between Reed and me at all times. You do exactly what we say. And if I tell you to run, you run. Understood? Lydia nodded. Elias and Mara headed for the back stairs. Wade watched them disappear, wondering if he'd ever see either of them again. Then he pushed the thought away. No time for that now. How long until they get to the lumberyard? Reed asked. 10 minutes to get there, 5 to set it up. Figure 15 minutes total. They waited. Wade watched the street counting Creed's men, looking for weak points in their positions. There weren't many. Creed had this sewn up tight. Through the town hall windows, Wade could see the territorial officials milling around, talking in worried groups. The assembly had obviously been suspended. These were powerful men, used to comfort and safety, now trapped in a building while a gunfight raged outside. Good. Let them be scared. Let them see what their corruption had created. 12 minutes had passed when Wade saw the first smoke. It rose from the east, black and thick. Then came the shouts, the ringing of the town fire bell. Creed's men on the street started looking toward the smoke. Some started to move in that direction. Creed himself didn't move. He stood in the middle of Main Street, staring at the smoke with narrowed eyes. He knew this was a diversion, knew someone was playing him, but he couldn't ignore it either. If the fire spread, it could consume the whole town. He'd lose his investments, his properties, everything he'd built. Wade watched Creed make the calculation, saw the moment he decided. "Half of you on the fire," Creed shouted. "The rest stay here. They're going to try something." 6 of the gunmen ran toward the smoke. That left 8, plus Creed. Still terrible odds, but better than before. "Now or never," Wade said. They went down the back stairs fast.
Wade led with his rifle, Reed behind him with Lydia between them. The back door of the hotel opened onto an alley that ran behind the buildings on Main Street. Wade checked both directions. Clear. They moved quickly along the alley, staying low. The families had taken refuge in what looked like a feed store. Wade found them huddled in the back room, Tom Garrett with a pistol and the Patterson father with an old rifle. "We're getting you into that town hall," Wade said without preamble. "There's a judge in there who needs to hear your testimony." "How?" Tom asked. "Creed's got the place surrounded. Front's covered, but I'm betting the back isn't." Wade moved to the rear window and looked out. The back of the town hall faced an open area used for wagon parking. Right now it was empty. "Reed, can you get them through that door?" The marshal checked. "It's locked, but I can shoot it open."
"That'll bring Creed's men running. Then we better move fast." They assembled by the back door of the feed store. 2 families, a federal marshal, a former investigator, and a little girl with a leather satchel. Wade looked at them and felt something twist in his chest. These weren't soldiers. These were just people who'd lost everything and were trying to get it back. People who'd been knocked down and were standing back up one more time. "Listen to me," Wade said. "Once we move, there's no stopping. We run straight for that town hall. If shooting starts, you keep running. Don't look back. Don't stop. Just get inside and find Judge Blackwell. Tell him everything. Show him the ledger. Make him listen." "What about you?" Tom asked. "Reed and I will cover you. Now get ready." Wade kicked open the back door and they ran. The distance from the feed store to the town hall was maybe 40 yards. It felt like miles. Wade heard someone shout from the street, then gunfire. Bullets kicked up dirt around them. Reed reached the town hall door first and put 3 rounds into the lock. The door splintered and flew open. He shoved Tom Garrett inside, then the Pattersons, then Lydia. Wade was backing toward the door, firing at Creed's men who were running around the corner of the building. He dropped one, missed another. His rifle clicked empty. "Wade, come on!" Reed shouted. Wade turned and ran the last 10 feet. He made it through the door just as bullets chewed into the frame around him. Reed slammed it shut, and they shoved a heavy cabinet in front of it. They were in a back hallway of the town hall. Voices came from the main chamber ahead. "Move," Wade said, reloading as he walked. They burst into the main assembly chamber and every conversation stopped. 30-some territorial officials, judges, and administrators stared at them. Wade looked like hell, covered in dust and gunpowder, bleeding from a cut on his cheek he hadn't even noticed getting. Reed's federal badge was the only thing that looked official. And between them, Lydia held up the ledger. "Which one of you is Judge Blackwell?" Reed demanded. An older man with white hair and wire-rimmed glasses stood up slowly. "I am. Who the devil are you people?" "Federal Marshal Silas Reed, out of Denver. I'm here to present evidence of land fraud, bribery, and murder involving several men in this room." The chamber erupted. Men shouted denials. Some stood up. Others tried to leave, but found the main doors blocked by Creed's men outside, who apparently hadn't gotten word about the back entrance yet. "This is outrageous," someone yelled. "You can't just burst in here." "Sit down and shut up," Reed said flatly. He turned back to Blackwell. "Your Honor, I have documented evidence of systematic corruption. I also have witnesses prepared to testify." Blackwell looked at the chaos around him, then at Reed's badge, then at Lydia. His eyes softened slightly when he saw the little girl. "Let me see this evidence." Lydia walked forward. She seemed so small in that big chamber, surrounded by powerful men. But she walked steady, chin up, holding that satchel. She set it on the table in front of Blackwell and pulled out the ledger. "My name is Lydia Vale," she said, her voice clear. "My mama was Margaret Vale. She worked for Mr. Jonah Creed keeping his books. This is a copy she made of all the illegal things he did. She died 3 days ago because he found out she made it. She told me to bring it to Wade Mercer and make sure everyone knew the truth." She opened the ledger to the first page. "These are the families he killed or ran off their land. Page 1 through 27. She turned to another section. "These are the judges and lawmen he paid. Page 28 through 45. Some of them are in this room right now." Men started standing up, trying to leave. But the back door Wade and Reed had come through was the only exit now, and Wade was standing in front of it with his rifle. "Nobody leaves," he said quietly. Blackwell was reading the ledger, his face growing paler with each page. "My word, this is comprehensive." "It's evidence," Reed said.
admissible evidence. I also have federal land records that corroborate the ledger. And we have witnesses. Tom Garrett stepped forward. Judge Blackwell, I'm Tom Garrett. 3 years ago, men working for Jonah Creed killed an innocent woman named Sarah Mercer. They killed her to scare me off my land. I can testify to that. The Patterson father joined him. Samuel Patterson, Creed's men burned my ranch and threatened my family. We lost everything. The courts ruled against us because the judge was on Creed's payroll. It's documented in that book. Other voices started joining in, not from Wade's group, but from the assembly itself. Men who'd been silent before now finding their courage. I've seen irregularities in land transfers, one administrator said. I reported them and was told to keep quiet. I was approached about accepting payments, another voice added. I refused, but I know others who didn't. The dam was breaking. Once a few people started talking, others felt safe enough to follow. Stories of intimidation, bribery, murder, years of corruption spilling out into the open. Blackwell held up his hand for silence. This is extraordinary. If even half of these allegations are true, we're talking about criminal conspiracy on a massive scale. He looked at Reed. Why didn't you bring this through proper channels? Because the proper channels are compromised. I couldn't trust anyone. Reed gestured at the room. How many men here are named in that ledger? How many would have made this evidence disappear? Before Blackwell could answer, the back door exploded inward. Creed stood there with 6 armed men. The cabinet Wade and Reed had pushed in front of it lay in pieces. Creed's face was twisted with rage. Enough, he snarled. His men spread out, guns trained on everyone in the room. The territorial officials scrambled away from the line of fire. Some dove under tables. You should have taken my offer, Mercer, Creed said. Should have ridden away when you had the chance. Wade kept his rifle pointed at Creed. It's over. They've all seen the ledger. They've heard the testimony. You can kill us, but you can't kill everyone in this room. Can't I? Creed looked around at the cowering officials. Most of these men work for me. The ones who don't are too scared to do anything about it. You really think this changes anything? I think it changes everything, Blackwell said. He was still standing, one of the few men who hadn't taken cover. Mr. Creed, I am a circuit judge with federal authority. Based on the evidence presented here, I am issuing a warrant for your arrest on charges of fraud, bribery, conspiracy, and murder. Creed laughed. You think I care about a warrant? You think any of this matters? I own this territory. I own the courts. I own the law. You owned it, Blackwell corrected. Past tense. Because in about 10 minutes, a federal marshal will ride in with a full company of cavalry I sent for when I first heard gunshots. And unlike the local authorities, they can't be bought. Creed's smile faltered. You're bluffing. I'm not. I sent a runner the moment violence broke out. They were camped 15 miles from here for the assembly. They should be arriving any moment now. As if on cue, a bugle sounded in the distance, the thunder of hooves, shouting. Creed's face went white. His men looked at him, waiting for orders. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Creed made his choice. He brought his gun up, aiming it at Lydia. If I'm going down, that little brat is coming with me. Wade fired. The shot took Creed in the right shoulder, spinning him around. His gun fell from his hand. His men started to raise their weapons, but Reed was already shouting. Federal cavalry is outside. Put down your weapons or you'll hang for treason. The combination of Wade's shot, Creed wounded, and the approaching soldiers was too much. One of the gunmen dropped his rifle, then another, then all of them. Creed fell to his knees, clutching his shoulder. Blood ran between his fingers. He looked up at Wade with pure hatred. You destroyed everything I built. Wade walked over to him slowly. He thought about Sarah, about the 3 years he'd spent dying inside, about all the families in that ledger, about a 6-year-old girl who'd crossed 100 miles of frozen hell. He should have felt satisfaction, triumph, something. Instead, he just felt tired. You destroyed yourself, Wade said. You just didn't know it until now. Federal cavalry poured into the town hall, led by a captain who immediately took charge of the situation. Creed and his men were arrested, disarmed, and shackled. The ledger was entered into federal custody, along with Reed's supporting documents. The territorial officials sat in stunned silence as more names were read from the ledger. Several were arrested on the spot. Others confessed immediately, hoping for leniency. The fire in the lumberyard was still burning, but Elias and Mara appeared in the doorway, both blackened with smoke, but alive. Mara was limping slightly but waving off help. "Did we do it?" she asked. "Did it work?" Wade looked at Lydia, who was sitting next to Judge Blackwell, showing him pages in the ledger and explaining them in her clear, steady voice. The judge was listening carefully, treating her words with the same respect he'd give any adult witness. "Yeah," Wade said, "we did it." But the cost became clear over the next few hours. The lumberyard fire had spread to 3 other buildings before the cavalry helped put it out. 2 people were dead from the initial shootout on the town hall steps. 5 of Creed's men were wounded. Wade's own hand was bleeding from where he'd punched the wall back in the mining camp, and he hadn't even noticed he'd been grazed by a bullet across his ribs. The town looked like a war zone, which, Wade supposed, it had been. That evening, as the sun set over Coal Ridge, Wade sat on the steps of the town hall and watched soldiers patrol the streets. Judge Blackwell had taken over the biggest hotel as a temporary courthouse. Trials would start tomorrow. They'd probably last weeks. Lydia came and sat next to him. Someone had found her clean clothes and food. She looked almost normal, except for the bandage still wrapped around her head and the old, beyond her years look in her eyes. "Judge Blackwell said I have to testify at all the trials," she said. "You up for that?" "I don't know. He said it might take a long time. Weeks, maybe months." She looked at Wade. "What happens to me during all that? I can't just live in a courthouse." It was the question Wade had been avoiding, the question he'd promised to answer and still didn't have a good solution for. "You'll stay with me," he heard himself say. "I'll rent a place here in town while the trials go on. After that," he paused. "After that, we'll figure it out." "You mean it? I can stay with you?" Wade looked at this little girl who'd somehow become the most important person in his world in the space of 3 days. Who'd reminded him why he used to fight. Who'd given him something to protect besides his own grief. "Yeah," he said. "I mean it." Lydia leaned against him, and Wade put his arm around her small shoulders. They sat like that as the sun disappeared and stars came out. Mara joined them after a while, settling on Wade's other side with a groan. "I'm too old for this much excitement." "You're 35, Wade said. "Feels like 80. She looked at Lydia. "You did good, kid. Your mama would be proud." "You think so?" "I know so. You finished what she started. That takes courage most adults don't have." Reed came out next, looking exhausted but satisfied. "Blackwell's sorting through the ledger. He's identified at least 20 men for immediate arrest, another 40 for investigation. This is going to shake up the whole territory." "Good," Wade said. Elias was the last to appear. The old man had a bandage on his arm where a bullet had grazed him during the lumberyard chaos, but he was grinning. "Heard the cavalry captain talking," he said. "Blackwell's recommending commendations for all of us. Federal recognition for exposing the corruption." "I don't want a commendation," Mara said. "I want my ranch back." "You'll get it. All the land seizures are being reviewed. Families are getting their property returned." Reed smiled. "Creed's entire empire is being dismantled. Every piece of it." They sat together as night fell completely. 5 people who'd been strangers 3 days ago and were now bound together by shared trauma and unlikely victory. "What do you think happens to Creed?" Lydia asked. "He'll hang," Reed said matter-of-factly. "The evidence is overwhelming. Murder, conspiracy, theft on a federal scale. Judge Blackwell will send him to trial, and a jury will convict him." "Good," Lydia said simply. Wade expected to feel something at that. Satisfaction that the man who'd killed Sarah would pay for it. But he just felt empty. Sarah was still dead. All those families in the ledger were still destroyed. Justice didn't undo any of that. But it did prevent new victims, and maybe that was enough. Later that night, Wade got Lydia settled in a hotel room with Mara keeping watch. He walked the streets of Coal Ridge, looking at the damage, the burned buildings, the bullet holes in walls. This wasn't how he'd imagined justice working when he'd been a young investigator full of ideals. It was messier, more violent, more complicated. People had died. The town was half destroyed. Nothing was clean or simple. But it was done. The corruption was exposed. The guilty would be punished. The victims would get their land back. Wade found himself standing in front of the building that would have been Sarah's favorite, a small bookstore that had somehow survived the fire. The owner was inside, sweeping up broken glass. "We're closed," the man called out. "I know, just looking." Wade studied the titles in the window. Sarah used to love reading, would read to him in the evenings about faraway places and impossible adventures. She would have liked this, Wade said to no one in particular. Then he turned and walked back to the hotel. Lydia would probably have nightmares again tonight. She'd need someone there when she woke up screaming, and Wade was starting to realize that maybe she wasn't the only one who'd needed saving. Maybe he'd been drowning too, and this strange little girl had thrown him a rope without even knowing it. The trials could wait until tomorrow. The testimony and the justice and the reckoning with Jonah Creed. Tonight, Wade just needed to make sure one 6-year-old orphan knew she wasn't alone in the world. Sometimes that was enough. Wade woke to Lydia screaming. He was off the chair and across the hotel room before his eyes had fully opened, years of investigator instincts kicking in. She was tangled in the blankets, thrashing, her small hands clawing at nothing. "They're coming!" she gasped. "Mama, they're coming!" "Lydia." Wade grabbed her shoulders gently but firmly. "You're safe. You're in Coleridge. The bad men are in jail. You're safe." Her eyes snapped open, wild and unfocused. For a second, she didn't recognize him. Then her breathing started to slow. "Wade?" "Right here." She fell against him, shaking. This was the third nightmare in as many nights. Each one left her exhausted and terrified, and there wasn't a damn thing Wade could do except be there when she woke up. Mara appeared in the connecting doorway, hair loose, her own pistol in hand. "Another one?" Wade nodded. "I'll make tea." Mara disappeared into her room. She'd been staying with them since the shooting, claiming she wanted to help with Lydia, but Wade suspected she had her own nightmares to deal with. Nobody came out of a gunfight unchanged. The trials had started 2 days after the confrontation at the town hall. Judge Blackwell moved fast, knowing that every day of delay gave Creed's remaining allies time to destroy evidence or flee. The courthouse was packed from dawn to dusk with witnesses, lawyers, federal officials, and curious townspeople who wanted to see the mighty brought low. Jonah Creed sat in the defendant's chair with his arm in a sling, watching the proceedings with cold eyes. He'd refused counsel at first, then accepted a lawyer who seemed more interested in getting his name in the newspapers than actually defending his client. Not that it mattered. The evidence was overwhelming. Wade had testified on the second day, stood in front of the packed courtroom, and told them about Sarah, about how she'd been killed as a message to intimidate Tom Garrett, about finding her name in the ledger with a price next to it like she was merchandise. $200, Wade had said, his voice flat. "That's what my wife's life was worth to Jonah Creed. $200. Creed had smiled at him from across the courtroom. Actually smiled, like it was all some private joke. Wade had wanted to kill him right there. Would have, if Reed hadn't put a warning hand on his arm. Now it was Lydia's turn. Judge Blackwell had delayed her testimony as long as possible, giving her time to recover from the head wound and the trauma. But the prosecution needed her. She was the one who'd carried the ledger, the one whose mother had created it, the living link between the evidence and Creed's crimes. "She's 6 years old," Wade had argued that morning. "You can't put her through that." "I don't have a choice," Blackwell had replied, and he'd looked genuinely sorry about it. Without her testimony connecting the ledger to her mother and her mother to Creed, we have a book full of accusations but no proven chain of custody. A good defense attorney could claim the ledger is a forgery. We need Lydia to authenticate it. "Then let me testify about what she told me." "That's hearsay. It won't hold up." "I'm sorry, Wade, I truly am, but if we want to make sure Creed hangs, we need her on that stand." So now Wade sat with Lydia in a small room off the courthouse, waiting for the bailiff to call her name. She was wearing a new dress that Mara had bought for her, blue with white flowers. Her hair was braided. The bandage was gone from her head, leaving just a thin red scar disappearing into her hairline. She looked terrified. "I don't think I can do this," Lydia whispered. "You can." "What if I forget what to say? What if I mess up and he goes free?" Wade knelt in front of her so they were eye to eye. "You're not going to mess up. All you have to do is tell the truth. Judge Blackwell is going to ask you questions and you answer them honestly. That's it. Mr. Creed will be there." "He will. But he can't hurt you. There's armed guards all around him. He's in chains. He can't touch you." "He's going to look at me." Wade paused. She was right about that. Creed would stare at her the whole time, trying to intimidate her. It's what Wade would do if he were a monster trying to scare a child witness. "Then you look right back at him," Wade said. You look at him and you remember that you beat him. A 6-year-old girl crossed 100 miles in winter and brought down his whole empire. He lost to you, Lydia. Not to me, not to Marshall Reed, not to Judge Blackwell. To you. She considered this. Some of the fear left her eyes. Will you be there? In the courtroom? Front row, the whole time. If you get scared, you just look at me. I'll be right there. The bailiff knocked on the door. 5 minutes, Mr. Mercer. Lydia stood up, smoothing her dress with hands that still trembled slightly. Wade wanted to grab her, put her on a horse, and ride as far away from this courthouse as possible. Wanted to protect her from what was about to happen. But he couldn't. This was the price of justice. This was what her mother had died for. Ready? He asked. No, but I'm going anyway. They walked to the courtroom together. Reed was waiting outside along with Tom Garrett and his family. The Pattersons had already testified and returned to their recovered ranch, but Tom had stayed for Lydia's testimony. You got this, little one, Tom said, squeezing her shoulder. The courtroom was packed beyond capacity. People stood along the walls, crowded in the doorway. News of the corruption trials had spread across the territory and beyond. Journalists from Denver, Salt Lake City, even San Francisco had arrived to cover what they were calling the largest criminal conspiracy in Western history. Wade led Lydia down the center aisle. Every eye in the room followed them. Lydia kept her chin up, her hand tight in Wade's. Creed sat at the defendant's table, and just as Wade had predicted, his eyes locked onto Lydia the moment she appeared. That cold smile spread across his face. Wade felt Lydia's hand tighten. Don't look at him yet, Wade whispered. Not until you're ready. They reached the witness stand. Wade helped Lydia up the steps, then reluctantly let go of her hand. He took his seat in the front row next to Mara and Reed. Judge Blackwell looked down at Lydia with kind eyes. Miss Vale, do you understand why you're here today? Yes, sir. Her voice was small but steady. And do you promise to tell the truth about what you know? I do. Thank you. I know this is difficult. If you need to stop at any time, you just tell me, all right? Lydia nodded. The prosecutor stood up. His name was Morrison, a federal attorney brought in specifically for this case. He approached the witness stand carefully, like Lydia might bolt. Lydia, can you tell the court your full name and age? Lydia Margaret Vale. I'm 6 years old. And where were you born? Sterling. That's in Colorado. Who were your parents? My mama was Margaret Vale. I never knew my daddy. He died before I was born. Morrison pulled out the ledger, now marked as evidence and preserved in a leather case. Lydia, do you recognize this book? Yes, sir. That's my mama's ledger. Can you tell the court what this ledger is? It's a record of all the bad things Mr. Creed did. Mama kept it hidden. She wrote down everything in secret because she knew it was wrong, but she was scared to stop working for him. Did your mother tell you what was in this ledger? She made me memorize parts of it, in case something happened to her. Lydia's voice wavered slightly. She said if anything bad happened, I should take the book and run to Wade Mercer. She said he was the only person who couldn't be bought. Some people in the courtroom turned to look at Wade. He kept his eyes on Lydia. When did something bad happen? Morrison asked gently. 3 days before I found Mr. Mercer. Mama woke me up in the middle of the night. She said men were coming. She grabbed the ledger and put it in the satchel and put me on a horse. She made me promise to ride until I found a white barn and a man named Wade Mercer. Did you see these men who were coming? I heard them. I heard horses and shouting. Mama slapped my horse and it started running. I heard... She stopped, swallowing hard. I heard guns. I heard Mama scream. The courtroom was silent. Even the journalists had stopped writing. What did you do then? Morrison asked. I kept riding. Like Mama said. I rode for 3 days. Bad men chased me. They shot at me. Lydia touched the scar on her head. One of the bullets hit me here, but I kept going. I slept in a burned house one night. My horse fell in a river and I had to walk. My feet got real cold. Did you ever think about stopping, about giving up? Yes, sir. Lots of times. But Mama died to get me away. I couldn't let that be for nothing. Morrison walked to the defendant's table and stood next to Creed. Lydia, do you see the man who your mother worked for? The man whose crimes she documented in this ledger? This was the moment.
Lydia had to look at Creed, had to identify him in front of the entire courtroom. Wade leaned forward in his seat, willing her to be strong. Lydia turned her head slowly. Her eyes met Creed's cold stare.
For 5 long seconds, neither of them moved. A 6-year-old girl and the man who'd killed her mother, locked in a silent battle of wills. Then Lydia spoke, her voice clear and strong. "That's him. That's Jonah Creed. He's the one who had my mama killed. He's the one who sent men to hunt me. He's the reason I had to ride through a blizzard and almost die." She paused. "But Mama wrote everything down, and I carried it farther than he could stop me." The courtroom erupted. People were talking, pointing, some even applauding. Creed's face had gone dark red with rage. He lunged forward in his chair, but the guards grabbed him immediately, forcing him back down. "Order!" Blackwell's gavel cracked like a gunshot. "Order in this court!" The room slowly quieted. Morrison was smiling slightly as he returned to his table. "No further questions, Your Honor." Creed's lawyer stood up for cross-examination. He was a thin man with nervous eyes who'd clearly realized he was defending the indefensible, but was stuck seeing it through. "Miss Vale, you said you memorized parts of the ledger, but you're only 6 years old. How can this court trust that you remember accurately?" "My mama was a teacher before she worked for Mr. Creed. She taught me to read when I was 4. She made me memorize poetry and history and math. I remember things good." "But you were traumatized. You'd been shot. You were freezing. You were scared. Couldn't your memories be confused?" "I know what happened to my mama. I know what's in that book. I know Mr. Creed killed people and stole their land." Lydia's voice didn't waver. "Being scared doesn't make me wrong." The lawyer tried a few more questions, but Lydia didn't budge. She answered each one calmly, clearly, without hesitation. After 10 minutes, the lawyer gave up and sat down. "The witness is excused," Blackwell said. "Lydia, you did wonderfully. Thank you." Wade met her at the witness stand and lifted her down. She was shaking, but her head was high. They walked back up the aisle together while the courtroom watched in respectful silence. Outside, Lydia finally let herself cry. Wade held her while she sobbed, all the fear and tension and trauma pouring out at once. "You did it," he said quietly. "You were perfect. I was so scared." "I know, but you didn't let it stop you. That's what courage is." Mara appeared with water and a handkerchief. Reed joined them a moment later, looking satisfied. "That testimony just sealed Creed's fate," the marshal said. "The jury saw a little girl who crossed hell itself to bring him down. They're going to convict him on every single charge." And they did. 3 days later, after just 2 hours of deliberation, the jury returned with guilty verdicts on all counts: murder, conspiracy, fraud, bribery, theft of federal land. The list went on for 10 minutes. Creed showed no emotion as the verdicts were read. But when Blackwell sentenced him to death by hanging, something flickered across his face. Fear, maybe. Or just the realization that he'd finally lost. "The execution will be carried out in 30 days, Blackwell announced. "May whatever higher power you believe in have mercy on your soul, Mr. Creed, because this court has none." The courtroom erupted in applause. People were standing, cheering, some crying with relief. Families who'd lost everything to Creed's schemes finally seeing justice done. Wade didn't cheer. He just watched as they led Creed away in chains. The man who'd killed Sarah, who'd destroyed hundreds of families, who'd almost killed a 6-year-old girl to protect his empire. It should have felt like victory, like closure. Instead, it just felt empty. That night, Wade sat on the hotel balcony looking out at Coleridge. The town was celebrating. Saloons were packed, music spilled into the streets, people danced and drank and reveled in Creed's downfall. Reed joined him, carrying 2 glasses of whiskey. He handed one to Wade. "To justice," the marshal said, raising his glass. Wade didn't raise his. "Justice doesn't bring anyone back." "No, but it prevents future victims, and sometimes that has to be enough." Reed drank, then set his glass down. "I'm heading back to Denver tomorrow. The territorial governor wants a full report. After that, there's talk of me being promoted. Apparently exposing massive corruption looks good on a resume. Congratulations. You could come with me. Denver could use investigators. Real ones, not the bot kind. You've still got the skills, Wade. Today proved that." Wade considered it. 3 weeks ago, he would have said no immediately, would have retreated back to his ranch and his bottle and his slow death. Now he had Lydia to think about. "I'll consider it," he said finally. "That's more than I expected." Reed stood up. "Whatever you decide, you did good work here. Sarah would be proud." After Reed left, Wade stayed on the balcony. He thought about Sarah, about the life they'd planned before Creed took it away, about the 3 years he'd wasted drowning in grief, about a 6-year-old girl who'd accidentally saved him while he was trying to save her. "You still awake?" Wade turned. Lydia stood in the doorway wearing a nightgown Mara had bought her, clutching a pillow. "Can't sleep?" "I keep seeing him. Mr. Creed. Keep thinking about what he said." During the sentencing, while being led away, Creed had looked directly at Lydia and spoken just loud enough for the front rows to hear. "Your mother was weak. She died sniveling and begging, just like you'll die someday, scared and alone." The guards had dragged him away before he could say more, but the damage was done. "He was trying to hurt you," Wade said. "That's all he has left now. Words." "I know, but what if he's right? What if I die alone?" Wade pulled her close. "You're not alone. You've got me. You've got Mara and Elias and Tom Garrett and all the families we helped. You've got more people who care about you than you know." "But what happens after the trials? After everything settles down? Where do I go?" It was the question Wade had been avoiding, the question that kept him awake at night. "You stay with me," he said. "If you want to. I'm not much good at this family stuff anymore, but I'm willing to try if you are." Lydia looked up at him with those 2 old eyes. "You mean like adoption?" "I mean like family, however that looks." Wade paused. "Your mama trusted me with you. I'm not going to betray that trust. You're stuck with me, kid, for as long as you want." She threw her arms around him and buried her face in his chest. Wade held her, this broken little girl, who'd somehow become his whole world in the space of 2 weeks. The trials continued for another 3 weeks. 27 men were convicted, including 4 judges, 6 federal marshals, and the Territorial Land Commissioner. Property seized under fraudulent claims was returned to the rightful owners. Tom Garrett got his ranch back. The Pattersons got theirs. Families Wade had never met wrote him letters thanking him for exposing the truth. Mara decided to sell her ranch and move to Coal Ridge. "Too many memories out there," she told Wade. "Time for a fresh start." She opened a boarding house for families displaced by Creed's schemes, giving them somewhere safe while they rebuilt their lives. Elias returned to his cabin in the hills, but visited Coal Ridge every Sunday. He brought Lydia ridiculous stories about prospecting and outlaws, making her laugh until she couldn't breathe. And Wade found himself looking at property in town, found himself thinking about the future instead of just surviving day to day. The execution was scheduled for a clear morning in late spring. Wade debated whether to attend. Part of him wanted to watch Creed hang to see physical proof that the monster was gone. Another part wanted nothing to do with it, wanted to let the past stay buried. Lydia made the decision for him. "I want to go," she said the night before. "I want to see it end." "You sure it's not going to be pretty?" "I know, but I need to see it. For Mama." So they went. The gallows had been erected in the town square. A huge crowd had gathered, people from across the territory come to witness the end of Jonah Creed's reign. Wade kept Lydia close, making sure she didn't get separated in the press of bodies. Creed was led out in chains flanked by federal marshals. He'd lost weight during imprisonment, looked smaller somehow. But his eyes still held that cold calculation. Judge Blackwell read the charges and the sentence, asked if Creed had any final words. Creed scanned the crowd until he found Wade and Lydia. He smiled that terrible smile one last time. "You think this changes anything? You think I'm the only one? There's 100 like me across this territory. 1,000. You stopped one empire, but there's always another." He paused. "You didn't win, Mercer. You just delayed the inevitable." "Maybe," Wade called back, "but we delayed it enough to give people hope, and hope's a dangerous thing for men like you." Creed's smile faded. The hood went over his head, the noose around his neck. Lydia grabbed Wade's hand and squeezed tight. The trapdoor opened. It was quick. Cleaner than Creed deserved, Wade thought. But it was done. People in the crowd cheered, some cried, some just stood silently, processing the end of a nightmare that had lasted years. Wade looked down at Lydia. "You okay?" She nodded. "It's over now. Really over." "Yeah, it is." They walked away from the gallows together. Behind them, workers were already taking down the scaffold. Tomorrow, it would be gone like it never existed. Like Creed had never existed. But the changes he'd forced would remain, the families who'd banded together, the corruption that had been exposed, the reminder that evil could be fought even when it seemed overwhelming. That afternoon, Wade signed papers making him Lydia's legal guardian. Judge Blackwell processed them personally, waiving the usual waiting periods and requirements. "That child has been through enough bureaucracy," the judge said. "As far as I'm concerned, she's yours. Take care of her." "I will." Wade bought a small house on the edge of Coleridge. Nothing fancy, just 2 bedrooms and a kitchen and a yard where Lydia could play. It was the first property he'd owned that didn't carry memories of Sarah. It felt like a new start. Lydia picked out her own room, chose her own furniture from the general store. Wade watched her transform from a terrified refugee into a normal 6-year-old, slowly but surely. She still had nightmares, still woke up screaming some nights, but they were getting less frequent. One evening, about a month after the execution, Lydia asked Wade about his wife. "What was she like, Mrs. Mercer?" Wade pulled out the one photograph he still had. Sarah on their wedding day, smiling at the camera with that bright joy she'd always carried. She was kind, stubborn as hell. She never turned away from someone who needed help, even when it was dangerous. Wade traced the photo with his finger. "You would have liked her, and she would have loved you. I wish I could have met her." "Me too." Lydia studied the photo for a long time. Then she said something that broke Wade's heart and healed it at the same time. "Maybe she sent me to you. Maybe she knew you needed someone to take care of." Wade pulled her close. "Maybe she did." That night, Wade slept without nightmares for the first time in 3 years. He woke to sunlight streaming through windows and the sound of Lydia singing in the kitchen, some folk song her mother had taught her. He found her making breakfast, or trying to. The eggs were burned and the bacon was raw, but she was so proud of herself. "I made food," she announced. "I can see that. It's probably terrible. Probably. But we'll eat it anyway." They sat at the small kitchen table and ate terrible eggs and raw bacon and laughed about it. Just a man and a little girl who'd both lost everything and somehow found each other. Outside, Coleridge was waking up to a new day. The scars from the lumberyard fire were fading. New buildings were going up where Creed's false empire had fallen. People walked the streets without fear. And in a small house on the edge of town, Wade Mercer realized he wanted to live again. Not just survive. Not just exist. Actually live. For Lydia. For Sarah's memory. For all the people who couldn't fight back themselves. He thought about Reed's offer. About being an investigator again. About using his skills to help people instead of hiding from the world. "Lydia," Wade said, "how would you feel about me going back to work? Being an investigator again?" She looked up from her eggs. "Would it be dangerous?" "Sometimes." "Would you come home?" "Always." She considered this seriously. "Then I think you should do it. Mama used to say people who are good at helping should help, even if it's scary." Smart kid. "All right then," Wade said. "I'll talk to Reed about it." And he did. By the end of the week, Wade had a federal investigator's badge and his first case, helping a widow prove her husband's death wasn't an accident, but murder. It was smaller than bringing down Creed's empire, but it mattered to her. That's what Wade remembered as he worked the case. Every victim mattered. Every injustice deserved someone willing to fight against it. Sarah had known that. Lydia's mother had known it. Even Lydia herself, at 6 years old, had understood it well enough to cross 100 miles of hell. Now it was Wade's turn to carry that torch forward. The case took 2 weeks to solve. Wade found evidence of deliberate sabotage, tracked down the killer, and got a conviction. The widow cried and thanked him and paid him with money she could barely afford. Wade donated it to Mara's boarding house. More cases followed. A disputed land claim, a missing child who'd run away from an abusive uncle. A string of thefts targeting immigrant families. Wade took them all, built a reputation as an investigator who couldn't be bought and wouldn't quit. And every night, he came home to Lydia, helped her with reading lessons, taught her to play chess, listened to her talk about her day. She was growing. The haunted look was fading from her eyes, replaced by something younger, more innocent, more like a normal child. Sometimes Wade caught himself smiling for no reason, Caught himself planning for next month, next year, the future. Life had meaning again, purpose. 3 months after Creed's execution, Wade and Lydia visited Sarah's grave. It was the first time Wade had been back since the funeral. He knelt by the headstone and finally said the words he'd been holding back for 3 years. "I'm sorry I gave up. Sorry I wasted so much time hiding, but I'm doing better now. I'm living again." He paused. "And I'm taking care of someone. A little girl who needed help. I think you would have liked her. Hell, you probably would have loved her." Lydia put a handful of wildflowers on the grave. "I'll take care of him too, Mrs. Mercer. I promise." They stood there for a while, the three of them. Past, present, and future all connected in that quiet moment. Then Wade took Lydia's hand and they walked back to town together. The sun was setting over the Wyoming plains, painting everything gold and red. In the distance, the white barn where this all started was just visible on Wade's old property. Someone else lived there now, a young family trying to make a life on the frontier. Good. The house deserved life in it again. "Wade," Lydia asked as they walked, "do you think we're going to be okay? Like, really okay?" Wade thought about all they'd survived. The violence, the loss, the fear. Thought about how they'd both been broken and were slowly putting themselves back together. "Yeah," he said, "I think we are." And for the first time in 3 years, he actually believed it. 6 months passed before the nightmares finally stopped. Wade knew because he had been counting. 6 months of waking up 2 or 3 times a week to Lydia's screams, of holding her while she cried about masked men and her mother's final moments, of making tea at 3 in the morning and sitting with her until dawn. Then one morning he woke to silence and sunlight and the smell of something burning in the kitchen. He found Lydia attempting pancakes, flour on her face, batter on the floor, smoke coming from the stove. "I was trying to surprise you," she said sheepishly. Wade looked at the disaster zone that was his kitchen and felt his chest tighten with something he hadn't felt in years. Not grief, not anger, just simple, uncomplicated happiness. "You definitely surprised me," he said, helping her scrape the charred remains off the pan. "How about I teach you how to do this properly?" They spent the morning cooking together, making a mess, laughing when the second batch came out just as bad as the first. By the third attempt, they had something edible, and they sat at the table eating slightly burned pancakes that tasted better than anything Wade had eaten in years. "I didn't have nightmares last night," Lydia said quietly. Wade paused mid-bite. "No? I dreamed about Mama, but it was a good dream. We were reading together like we used to. When I woke up, I wasn't scared. I was just..." She searched for the word. "Sad. But the okay kind of sad, you know?" Wade did know. He'd been working on that same kind of sad for 3 years. The kind that acknowledged loss without drowning in it. The kind that let you remember without being destroyed by the remembering. "That's good, kid. That's real good." The investigator work had picked up faster than Wade expected. Turned out a territory that had just exposed massive corruption was full of people who needed someone they could trust, someone who couldn't be bought. Wade's small office on Main Street had a simple sign above the door that Lydia had helped him paint. W. Mercer. Investigations. Truth matters here. The cases ranged from mundane to dangerous, missing livestock, disputed property lines, a few attempted murders, one elaborate fraud scheme involving fake mining claims. Wade took them all, turned none away if they couldn't pay. "You're going to go broke working for free," Mara told him one afternoon. She'd stopped by the office with food, claiming Lydia needed proper nutrition and Wade's cooking didn't count. "I'm doing fine." "You charged Mrs. Henderson $5 to track down her husband's killer. That case took you 3 weeks. She's a widow with 4 kids. What was I supposed to do, send her a bill she couldn't pay?" Mara shook her head, but she was smiling. "You're hopeless. I prefer principled. Same thing in this economy. But money came from unexpected sources. Families who'd gotten their land back from Creed's empire sometimes sent Wade payments, refusing to take no for an answer. The territorial government paid him consultant fees for testifying in related cases. And occasionally, someone with actual money hired him for work that paid properly. Enough to keep the house, feed Lydia, and maintain the office. Enough to live. Lydia had started school in Coleridge. Wade had been nervous about that, worried the other children would be cruel about her past. But the teacher, Miss Caroline Webb, was kind and observant. She seated Lydia next to a quiet boy named Thomas, whose father had also been killed in Creed's schemes. The two became inseparable. Wade would see them walking home together, Thomas carrying both their books, Lydia chattering about something she'd learned. Just normal kids doing normal kid things. It was exactly what she needed. One afternoon in early autumn, Marshal Reed returned to Coleridge on official business. He found Wade at the office, reviewing evidence for a case involving stolen cattle. "You look domestic," Reed said, dropping into the chair across from Wade's desk. "I look busy." "Same thing," Reed grinned. "Got a proposition for you. The territorial governor wants to establish a formal anti-corruption task force. Federal oversight, real authority, actual funding. He wants you to head it." Wade set down the papers he'd been reading. "Why me?" "Because you're the man who brought down Jonah Creed. Because every newspaper in 3 territories wrote about how you couldn't be bought. Because people trust you." Reed leaned forward. "And because you're damn good at this work and everyone knows it. I've got responsibilities here. Lydia, the cases people bring me, oh shit. Bring her with you. Set up in Denver. The schools are better there anyway. And as for the cases, you'd be handling bigger ones. Corruption that affects whole communities instead of individuals." Reed paused. "I'm not saying the work you do here doesn't matter. I'm saying imagine doing it with actual resources and authority." Wade thought about it. About leaving Coleridge, the place where he and Lydia had rebuilt their lives. About taking her away from the first stability she'd known since her mother died. "Let me talk to her," Wade said finally. That night at dinner, Wade laid out Reed's offer. Lydia listened carefully, asked smart questions about Denver, about whether they'd have to sell the house, about Thomas. "Would I make new friends there?" she asked. "Yeah, probably lots of them. Would you still come home every night?" "Every single night I possibly could." She poked at her food, thinking. Wade waited, knowing this decision had to be partly hers. "Mama used to say that standing still is the same as going backward," Lydia said finally. "That we should always be moving toward something better." She looked up at Wade. "Is Denver better?" "Different. Not necessarily better. But you could help more people there." "Maybe." Lydia nodded slowly. "Then I think we should go. But we keep this house. We come back sometimes. This is still home." Wade felt something loosen in his chest. "Deal." They moved to Denver in October. The territorial governor provided a house and an office. Wade assembled a team, Reed as his second-in-command, 2 younger investigators who'd proven themselves honest, and a secretary who'd lost her husband to one of the corruption schemes Wade had helped expose. Lydia enrolled in a school 3 blocks from the house. Within a week, she'd made friends with half her class and was invited to 2 birthday parties. Wade watched her transform. The scared, traumatized child who'd collapsed in his barn was becoming something else, something stronger. Not undamaged, but healing in a way that mattered. The anti-corruption work was harder than Wade expected. Every case revealed another layer of rot, another scheme, another group of powerful men exploiting the powerless. It was exhausting and frustrating and sometimes seemed hopeless, but they were making progress. Slowly. One case at a time. One evening, about 3 months after moving to Denver, Wade came home to find Lydia at the kitchen table with a newspaper spread in front of her. "There's an article about you," she said. Wade groaned. He hated the newspaper coverage, hated being called a hero or a crusader or any of the other dramatic titles journalists loved. "Don't believe what you read. It says you recovered $200,000 in stolen money and returned it to the families who lost it. That was the team, not just me. It says you personally arrested a federal judge who'd been taking bribes for 6 years. He was an idiot who kept terrible records. Wasn't hard." Lydia looked at him with those eyes that had seen too much too young. "Why don't you want credit for the good things you do?" Wade sat down across from her. "Because credit isn't the point. The work is the point. The families getting their money back, that judge not being able to hurt anyone else, that's what matters. Not my name in a newspaper." Mama used to say something like that. She said the people who do the most good are usually the ones talking the quietest about it. Your mama was a smart woman. She was. I wish you could have met her. Me too, kid. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Lydia asked a question that surprised him. "Do you still think about Mrs. Mercer, your Sarah?"
Every day? Does it still hurt?
Wade considered how to answer honestly.
Yes, but it's different now. It hurt like a wound before, like something bleeding that wouldn't stop. Now it hurts like a scar. Still there, still tender sometimes, but healed enough that I can live with it. I think about Mama like that too, like a scar. Lydia traced a pattern on the newspaper. Is that bad? That it doesn't hurt as much anymore? No, it means you're healing. It means you're doing what she wanted, living instead of just surviving. Lydia smiled, small but genuine. We're both pretty good at that now, huh? Living.
Yeah, we are. The work continued through winter and into spring. Wade's team exposed corruption in mining operations, land offices, shipping companies. They recovered stolen property, got convictions, and slowly rebuilt trust in institutions that had been rotten for years. It wasn't clean or easy. Some cases they lost. Some guilty men walked free on technicalities. Some victims never got justice. But enough did. Enough to matter. One case in particular stayed with Wade. A widow named Catherine Palmer, whose husband had been killed in a mine collapse caused by criminal negligence. The mine owner had bribed inspectors to overlook safety violations. 17 men had died. Wade spent 4 months building the case, found the payment records, got inspectors to testify, proved the owner knew the mine was dangerous and sent men in anyway to maximize profits. The jury deliberated for 30 minutes before convicting. After the verdict, Catherine Palmer found Wade outside the courthouse. "Thank you," she said simply. "Nobody else would even look at the case. They said it was an accident and I should accept it." "It wasn't an accident. It was murder for profit." "I know, and now everyone else knows too." She squeezed his hand. "My husband's death meant something because you made sure it did. That's all I wanted." Wade thought about that conversation for weeks afterward, about how justice wasn't just punishment for the guilty. It was acknowledgement for the victims. Proof that their loss mattered, that someone cared enough to fight for them, even when they couldn't fight for themselves. That's what Sarah had understood. What Lydia's mother had understood when she risked everything to document Creed's crimes. Some fights were worth having even when the odds were terrible. Especially when the odds were terrible. A year after Creed's execution, on the anniversary of the day Lydia had collapsed in Wade's barn, they took a trip back to Coleridge. The town had changed, grown. New businesses, new families, new life. Tom Garrett met them at the train station. His ranch was thriving again, his family healthy and happy. "The whole territory's different now," Tom said as they rode out to Wade's old property. "People aren't afraid anymore. They know corruption can be fought. You gave them that. We gave them that. You, the Pattersons, everyone who testified. Maybe, but you made it possible." The white barn was still standing, though the new owners had repainted it yellow. Wade felt a pang at that, then let it go. The place belonged to someone else now, different people making different memories. That night they had dinner at Mara's boarding house. Elias was there, older but still sharp, still telling ridiculous stories. Reed had made the trip from Denver. Even Judge Blackwell had come from the circuit court to join them. They toasted Margaret Vale and Sarah Mercer. They toasted justice and second chances, and the long road from that terrible winter to this warm spring evening. And they toasted Lydia, the girl with the leather satchel who'd changed everything. "Speech," someone called out. Lydia stood up, looking nervous but determined. At 7 years old, she was taller, healthier, but she still had that same serious expression when something mattered. "I don't really know what to say," she began. "Mama always said I talk too much anyway." Laughter rippled through the room. "But I guess I want to say thank you. To Mr. Mercer for protecting me when I showed up bleeding in his barn. To Miss Mara for teaching me that being strong doesn't mean not being scared. To Mr. Elias for making me laugh when I forgot how. To Marshall Reed for believing a little girl with a crazy story. To Judge Blackwell for listening even when powerful people told him not to." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "Mama died trying to do the right thing. She died scared and alone, but she died fighting, and she made sure I could keep fighting even after she was gone." Lydia's voice wavered slightly. "I think about that a lot, about how she could have just destroyed the ledger and stayed quiet, and maybe lived, but she didn't, because some things matter more than being safe." She looked at Wade. "Mr. Mercer taught me something too." He taught me that broken people can heal if they have a reason to. That sometimes the people who've lost the most are the ones who fight the hardest for others. That being good isn't about being perfect. It's about trying even when it's hard. Wade felt his throat tighten. So I guess what I want to say is, thank you for showing me that truth is stronger than fear when someone's brave enough to carry it. And thank you for being my family when I didn't have one anymore. She sat down to applause in tears. Wade pulled her close and she leaned against him like she had that first night in Devil's Canyon when they'd both been broken and terrified and trying to survive. They'd come a long way since then. Later that night, Wade walked to Sarah's grave alone. The stars were incredible out here, away from Denver's lights. The same stars Sarah had loved. We did it, he told the headstone. We got him. Got all of them. And I'm doing okay. Better than okay. He paused. I've got Lydia now. I know she's not ours, not the daughter we planned, but she's mine anyway. I'm raising her the way you would have, teaching her to stand up for people who can't stand up for themselves. Teaching her that justice matters, even when it's hard. The wind rustled through the grass. I still miss you. Every damn day. But I'm not dying anymore. I'm living. I think you'd be proud of that. Wade touched the cold stone. I hope you'd be proud. He stayed until the stars shifted overhead, then walked back to town where Lydia was waiting. The years that followed weren't easy. Wade's work remained dangerous. He was shot twice, stabbed once, and beaten badly enough to spend a week in hospital. Each time, Lydia was there when he woke up, holding his hand and looking fierce. You promised to come home, she'd say. I kept my promise, didn't I? She'd just shake her head and hold on tighter. Lydia grew up surrounded by justice and investigation. She helped Wade with research, learned to spot fraudulent documents, understood legal procedures before most kids understood long division. By the time she was 12, she could analyze a case file better than half of Wade's investigators. She's going to be dangerous when she grows up, Mara observed during one of her visits to Denver. She already is, Wade said proudly. Lydia became the youngest clerk in the territorial attorney's office at 16, working part-time while finishing school. She had her mother's intelligence and Wade's stubborn refusal to quit when something mattered. And she never forgot where she came from. Never forgot the terrified 6-year-old who'd crossed 100 miles of winter carrying proof that powerful men could be brought down. On her 18th birthday, Lydia made an announcement over dinner. I'm going to law school. Wade nearly dropped his fork. You're what? Law school. I've been accepted to the program in Denver. I want to be a prosecutor. She looked at him seriously. You've spent years investigating corruption and bringing people to trial. I want to be the one making sure they're convicted, making sure the evidence you risk your life to gather actually means something in court. Wade felt pride and terror in equal measure. It's hard work, dangerous sometimes. I know, you taught me that. Lydia smiled. You also taught me it's worth doing anyway. So she went to law school, graduated top of her class, became the youngest prosecutor in the territory at 21, and she was relentless. The criminals who'd grown comfortable after Creed's fall suddenly found themselves facing a prosecutor who understood their schemes from the inside out, who'd literally carried the evidence that brought down the biggest corruption ring in Western history. Lydia Vale was terrifying in a courtroom. Wade sat in on her first major trial, watching her dismantle a land fraud scheme that would have stolen property from 30 families. She was brilliant, methodical, and absolutely merciless. The defendant was convicted on all counts. Afterward, Wade found her in her office, still in her court clothes, reviewing the next case. You were incredible, he said. I was adequate. I should have caught him lying about the Denver property earlier. You got a conviction. I got justice. There's a difference. She looked up at him. You taught me that. Wade sat down across from her desk. When did you get so grown up? Probably around the time I had to memorize escape routes and load a revolver at 6 years old. But she smiled when she said it. The trauma was still there, would always be there, but it didn't define her anymore. She'd transformed it into purpose. Years passed. Wade's hair went gray. His old injuries ached on cold mornings. But he kept working because the work still mattered. Lydia became chief prosecutor, then a judge. Then, at 32, the youngest attorney general in the territory's history. She cleaned house, removed corrupt officials, implemented oversight procedures, made it harder for another Jonah Creed to rise. And through it all, she and Wade remained close. She still came over for Sunday dinners, still called him when she needed advice, still introduced him as her father, never her guardian. Because that's what he was. The man who'd given her a home when she had nothing, who'd taught her that being broken wasn't the same as being defeated, who'd shown her that one person willing to fight could make a difference. Wade was 63 when he finally retired from investigation work. His body couldn't take it anymore, the old wounds and new ones piling up until even he had to admit it was time. He opened a small training academy instead, teaching young investigators the skills he'd learned over decades, teaching them that truth mattered, that justice was worth fighting for even when the powerful said it wasn't. On the wall of the academy, he hung the original leather satchel Lydia had carried across Wyoming, preserved behind glass with a small plaque. Carried by Lydia Vale through 100 miles of winter, 1873. Proof that courage comes in all sizes. Students would ask about it. Wade would tell them the story, not the newspaper version with its dramatic heroics, but the real version. About a terrified little girl and a broken man who'd both needed saving and somehow saved each other. About how the smallest person carrying the truth can bring down an empire if they refuse to stop. Lydia came to the dedication of the academy, now Attorney General Vale, powerful and respected. She stood in front of that satchel and cried. "Mama would be so proud," she said. "She'd be proud of you," Wade corrected. "You became everything she hoped you'd be. We both did. You too." Lydia hugged him. "I wouldn't be here without you. You know that, right?" "I wouldn't be here without you either, kid. We saved each other." Wade lived to see Lydia elected to the territorial legislature. Lived to see her propose and pass comprehensive anti-corruption laws that became a model for other territories. Lived to see her name mentioned as a potential federal judge. He died peacefully in his sleep at 71 in the house in Denver with Lydia's family. She'd married a defense attorney, had 2 children nearby. His funeral was attended by hundreds, families he'd helped, criminals he'd put away who'd somehow found redemption, students he'd trained, officials he'd exposed and reformed. But Lydia's eulogy was simple. "Wade Mercer was my father in every way that mattered. He taught me that being good isn't about being perfect. It's about trying even when it's hard, even when you're scared, even when you've lost everything and can't see a reason to keep going." She paused, composing herself. "He taught me that truth is stronger than fear when someone's brave enough to carry it. And he proved that broken people can heal if they have something worth healing for." She looked at Wade's casket. "Thank you for being worth healing for. Thank you for teaching me to fight. Thank you for being my family." Her voice broke. "Thank you for not giving up on me that night in the barn. Thank you for everything." They buried him next to Sarah like he'd requested. The headstone was simple. Wade Mercer, husband, father, investigator. He stood for those who couldn't stand for themselves. Lydia visited the grave every year on the anniversary of that terrible winter night. She'd bring her children, tell them stories about their grandfather, about the white barn and the leather satchel and the truth that changed everything. And she'd tell them the most important lesson Wade had taught her. That one person can make a difference, not because they're perfect or fearless or powerful, but because they choose to care when caring is dangerous, because they choose to fight when fighting seems hopeless, because they choose to stand up when everyone else sits down. The work continued after Wade's death. Lydia carried it forward. Her children would carry it forward after her. An unbroken line of people who understood that justice wasn't a destination, but a direction. Something you moved toward every day, knowing you'd never fully arrive, but trying anyway. Because some things were worth fighting for even when the fight never ended. Truth, justice, protecting the powerless from the powerful, standing up for what's right even when it costs everything. That was Wade's legacy. Not the cases he solved or the criminals he caught, not the headlines or the history books. His legacy was a 6-year-old girl who became a force for justice, who changed a territory and eventually helped change a nation, who taught her children and her children's children that one brave person carrying the truth could move mountains. All because one broken man had opened his barn doors on a winter night and chosen not to turn away a bleeding child with a leather satchel and an impossible story. Sometimes the smallest choices change everything. Sometimes the most broken people are the ones who heal the world. And sometimes the truth really is stronger than fear when someone's brave enough to carry it all the way home.